Welcome to your Digital Mentor podcast. I am Alice Matimba from Welcome Connecting Science, and I'll be your host today. Today we'll have a conversation about the big return home with two distinguished scientists who started off their science careers in their home countries and then built up their careers in research labs in higher income countries abroad and have now gone back to their home countries to start up their own labs and businesses. So I am pleased to welcome our guests, Professors Daniella Ramos from Mexico and Brighton Samachanga from Zimbabwe, and I'll ask them to briefly introduce themselves. So starting with Daniella, could you briefly introduce yourself and tell us what you're currently doing?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Alice and the team for the invitation to this podcast. So my name is Daniella Robles. I am an assistant professor at the International Laboratory for Human Genome Research, which is part of the National Autonomous University of Mexico. And our research at the moment focuses on investigating the causes of acrolentigenous melanoma, which is the most common type of melanoma in Mexico and other Latin American countries, other African countries, and some Asian countries. So we do a lot of genomics, high throughput sequencing analysis, and try to apply it to our local population.
Thanks, Daniella. And Brighton, would you like to tell us about yourself and what you're currently doing?
Yes, I'm Brighton Samachanga. I'm founder and CEO of the Biotech Institute in Zimbabwe, which is an academic biotech institution. And previously, I was professor for physics of soft and biological matter in Germany. So in our institute, basically, we have a different area of research projects, which also tackle on genomics and proteomics, like antimicrobial resistance, some artificial intelligence application in the biomedical sector. And we have some traditional medicine programs that we are working on. And besides sort of our research, we also have technical services that we apply to the community. So applying our research, such as using some fruits of our research in medical diagnostic space. So this is really sort of my new drive at the moment.
Wow, welcome both of you. So I just want to obviously mention that obviously you both come from what we would call high mobility countries. So a lot of scientists are moving out of the countries, going somewhere else to do their PhDs and postdocs. People are moving for different reasons. Some are going through bilateral programs that are arranged by their countries. Some just go online and they just find a PhD and apply for it. And I have to admit that I'm one of those people that has been all over seeking to get educated, building my career. I've emigrated several times in and out. And I have to admit also that I'm one of the lucky ones that most times I ended up where I wanted to be. So I never found myself in a situation where I was like, oh, why am I here? Most of the times I actually chose to be where I was. But I'm actually particularly interested in your reasons for emigrating, particularly because we know that a lot of the push factors that cause people to migrate, that people are talk about low wages, lack of career guidance, lack of funding, lack of mentorship, socioeconomic factors. And of course, the pull factors in the countries where you go to include having sort of like going to a prestigious institution or high-performing institutions, higher wages, and in some cases they actually want people to come. So they're advertising for scientists to migrate to their countries. So they're quite favorable policies of immigration. So I'm just going to start with Daniella. So you did your undergraduate training in Mexico, and then you moved to the USA, right? And then to Europe, I suppose. And I really am interested in knowing, why did you move abroad?
Very good questions. So my undergraduate degree was here in Mexico, of course, but it was on genome sciences. So basically everything related to the study of genomes. And we did a lot of bioinformatics, programming, math, statistics, that kind of thing. And it was all very good. And actually in Mexico, I think is well developed the field of genomics in bacterial species and some plant species. But I was interested in humans. I study cancer at the moment. That was something I wanted to do. So in order to generate data at that scale, Mexico was not the best place, I would say, to study that, because we didn't have enough capacity for generating the data. And of course, the people that were specialized on analyzing this data were still very young, because we were just being trained. So in my case, it was a bit of a necessity of expanding and learning from from the best and from the people that were leading in that area. I just found that at the Sanger there in the UK. So that's really the main reason why I went there for my studies abroad.
That's really cool. I mean, I was just listening to you and I was thinking I probably had a similar kind of situation. And I consider myself having been privileged to actually say, well, I want to go somewhere. And I didn't have to go, but I wanted to go. Do you feel the same?
Definitely. No, immensely privileged. Yes, definitely for being able to do it. And of course, I mean, people, so I have some friends that stayed and I think they've done well. It's just a different areas of expertise. I think in Mexico, there are other priorities or historically have been other priorities or where to focus the research that is done in the country. And it's a lot of agriculture and mostly agriculture, I would say, and some bacterial species that do infect plants. So those people, I think, are doing very well. They stayed here and studied that. But I don't know, there were areas that were not that developed. And I definitely consider myself really, really privileged to be able to go, but also because of the undergraduate education I got where they always told me, like, you can do it, like, go beyond. And they brought all these invited speakers from all over to talk to us about all these different things. So in a way, they just opened our eyes to the world. And it was just we were very lucky to get the support, obviously from family and friends, but also from that program that was very strong in that sense.
That's really great. And Brighton, so what motivated you to move from Zimbabwe?
So for me, it's a cocktail of factors, nonetheless important than the other one. I was part of a program called United States Student Achievers Program. This was run by the, I think, U.S. Educational Department, which always selects the most talented students in Zimbabwe and try to help them get scholarships and go to Ivy League institutions and so forth in the United States. For me, I think before that, going outside the country was never a factor. Maybe I was a little kid, I hadn't quite really thought about it. But I think the big issue about USAP was that it's not just everybody, but somebody has to have sort of some economic difficulty to be sort of part of that program. So this has been sending, I think, students all over the world, more than 500 now and stuff. So I got part of this program. I was applying to Caltech, and Florida Tech, the US, but in the end, what won my heart was Germany. It's an American university. It was very small. That was what I was looking at. I was not educated from the liberal arts kind of schooling, so I didn't want anything too huge like Columbia or Yale, because I was like, okay, I don't want to study liberal arts, but not because they're not important, but because of I had been brought up a certain way and educated a certain way at that level in my life. So I ended up going to Germany. I think this is one sort of, it was an opportunity that was presented. Otherwise, I would have gone to the UZ and studied medicine. I never liked medicine because I think from some of academic point of view, I would have achieved or succeeded. But I always felt a little bit too playful to play with humans. So I chose a program called biochemical engineering. I had really no idea what it was, but I think the whole idea of mixing chemical engineering and some biology was quite exciting. So I was like, okay, I got there. I have an experimental kind of degree that is still kind of in touch in the human health sector. So this kind of sort of was the drive factor that I got there. Of course, I thought I had, was also sort of some financial aid that you get there. I think we had to pay a bit ourselves, but was a lot of financial aid. And I think from there on, it's just like, just like kept in Germany. I did my master's in Germany, PhD in Switzerland, Germany again for postdocs and whatever. But I think after that, it was just simply following my passions. And I always liked the idea of Schengen, the freedom of movement. So the US was never an attractive thing for me, because once you get bored in Switzerland, you can go to Italy, you can go to France, everything is different. So I like this freedom of movement. So I think in a nutshell, part educational, part fun. One thing which one I remember when I was applying was Caltech, and they said then they were writing on their website what students like to do for fun, and they would electronically lock your door, and then you have to reprogram to get inside. I was like, okay, that's not what I'm planning to do Saturday night, as much as I love my schooling. So this is sort of say my mentality and my thinking process in going to Germany in the end.
Wow, that's quite a load, and very interesting indeed. And when you are now sort of like abroad, I know I definitely feel it sometimes, that I feel conflicted, or I feel a bit guilty, being in this environment where you're doing all this cutting edge stuff. And do you ever feel, I sometimes feel like maybe I could be contributing to development of my country and so forth. I'm wondering if you ever feel like that. I always tell people, like, I sometimes feel like I'm living in two countries, and I mean, one, I'm here for a reason, but I'm thinking about what could I be doing somewhere else, because I'm always sort of like in between. Do I stay here? Do I go back? And I'm just interested in knowing how you felt when you were here before you returned.
For me, I think it's two ways. I felt it was an important part of my life to be there, because most of the times you can be in Zimbabwe, but you're not useful. You don't want to sort of be an additional statistic to the unemployment rate. I think you want to bring something to the table. And I think with the sort of level of education that we will be having, I think from my point, you should not be expecting to go there to have somebody give you a job, especially in countries like Zimbabwe, because you have to create a job. You have a certain thinking, yes, you have learned a lot of things. So I think for me, it was like learning as much as I could. That's why you see my background in terms of degree, like I'm biology, I'm programming, I'm in physics, I'm whatever. Because when you go there, you're on your own. You don't have an institute whereby there's a biologist on top, there's a bioinformaticians below, there's a chemical engineer below. So I think as much as you would want to contribute, you can't. You have to reach a certain level, also from a resource-wise. But I also think even when I go back, I'm not completely going back. That would be sort of not smart, because there then you become alone. So you want to be in touch with your colleagues, with everybody here. So that's why it's my hybrid. I think for me, the Biotech Institute is both in Europe and in Zimbabwe. Physically in Zimbabwe, but with a lot of players in Europe, because we want to be also in touch with the latest information. Otherwise, I'm just sitting there after a while, I'm gone. I'm way back. What I think is state of the art is completely outdated.
Yeah, keeping your networks open. I'm sure, Daniela, you have an interesting story to tell as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of the things that Brighton has just said. I felt similarly. And when I was over there in the UK, I enjoyed my work very much. But after a while, you start feeling, I'm studying all these Europeans all over again. They've been studied forever. It's just, I can do something for other people, right? For my people. So in a way, I always wanted to go back and apply what I learned here. But it was always, as Brighton mentioned, a difficult time to decide, when the resource, I mean, are you going to have resources? Where's going to be your job? Like, are you going to be connected? So in a way, I was very, very, very lucky because an institute just opened while I was doing my postdoc, an institute here. And they contacted me because I had been, as Brighton also said, I was also keeping in touch with people here, and I was spamming them with like, hey, I got another paper, look, I'm here, yay. So they contacted me like, well, you're doing research on humans, we're interested in that. Do you want to come back and apply for this group leader position? So I thought that was a good opportunity. That was very lucky because it's not common that happens, like a whole institute opens and hires a bunch of people. So that's how I could come back. And it was, it's exactly that, not feel isolated, not completely go back, because at least in my case, I still have a position at the Sanger, an international, what is it called?
Fellows program.
An international fellow. But the thing is, they help with research costs, and they help with access to their facilities and discussions with them. As Brighton was saying, just keeping in touch with people there and knowing that you can have access to the resources as well, that just makes all the difference in the world. That allows you to have a bit of best of both worlds, I would say, because you're studying what you want. Here, I'm studying Mexicans, variation in Mexicans and Latin Americans, but also with resources from abroad. So it's a bit of best of both worlds in my case.
I think it has to be. It has to be.
Yeah, and I guess, I mean, I liked the fact that, you both would keep in touch with the other scientists in your countries, and which to some extent, obviously meant that it would make it actually easier for you to understand when you decide to go back. Helps you to understand what you need. You already know people, you're already networked and so forth. A couple of years ago, I got involved in a program called the Young African Scientists in Europe, YASE, which was being led by Luc Alamand from AfriSciTech. And he was interested in bringing scientists in Europe together. We met in Toulouse, and it was really quite interesting. I think there were about 200 or 300 scientists from everywhere in Europe. And it was really interesting just seeing some of the work that people are doing, contributing back to science back in their countries, some presentations where people were contributing either directly or indirectly. But what was amazing is the interest in most, diasporians, in at least the ones that I met there, in doing something. And because, there isn't really a curriculum for that, there isn't really like, oh, this is what you do, this is how you go about it. It was just like really nice for people to share and to, understand how people are actually transferring their skills and knowledge to people in their countries. So I'm sure that you were both quite, you had a strong conviction that you've now gained something, you're world-renowned scientists, and you really, really now have to go and contribute your skills in your home countries. And I want to know more about, that process. Like, how did you decide this? How did you decide, okay, now is the time to go? And I want to know, what were some of those deciding factors, that made you take the leap of faith and went back?
Well, I think for me, it was when I got this, professorship in physics in Leipzig. I think the idea that I ended up in physics, I think single molecule biophysics, and it was a little bit theoretical. I was like, I always say, which something I say now, is like, if you're a scientist and we are hit by an epidemic like COVID, and your science cannot maybe solve or contribute, maybe you shouldn't be working on that. It's maybe not useful if it cannot save mankind in a time of an epidemic. Maybe so. I got to a point where I felt my research was a little bit very high-end, artificial. Like we were doing like single molecule biophysics. It's really fancy. It's the cutting edge. It's very basic. It's the future and so forth. All this nanopore sequencing, I think came from the same technology for generation sequencing. But we get into the theoretical models, and I'm like, okay, I think this is a point whereby I think I stopped. I just thought like, maybe I went too far, and I said, okay, I've reached my plateau. I want to have something that have a direct effect on the people around me. And also I had tried it before, but it was a different point. But that point was a years back, but I didn't have the financial resources to actually start something. And actually, I'm glad I didn't, because I don't think I actually also had the maturity to actually sustain such a big project. And also considering you're in Zimbabwe, I was much younger then. I wanted to do it like 2012, 2013. And, negotiating with some of these older players and so forth, and you're like much younger and so forth, it's a bit different. I'm glad. I think it was a sort of, some of factors were just like, actually what happened, how I actually ended up, I had a wedding with my wife in October 2019. And when I met some friends of mine, and then I was like, okay, then they're like, oh, we are registering companies. I'm like, oh, I might as well just register it. And then I registered it. And then after I registered it, then I was like, oh, now I might actually as well start working on it. So this whole institute, I built it during time of COVID. It wouldn't be the best time where somebody would actually build something. And one of the major push factors was actually COVID on its own. Because what happened was a scenario whereby all the European countries or developed countries, everybody shut down their borders. Now, you have then in a situation whereby you're Zimbabwean and you have a feeling that you should be contributing, because whoever is left there has to be able to provide an answer to the questions that we are being faced with. And I think for me, COVID was a really big push, because I would not have put my resources in a very sort of insecure climate financial-wise, because you might just lose your job. So you don't use your savings to start a crazy project during a pandemic. But also just because the people need it. So one of the main things was to start a COVID PCR testing facility, which we have now. So we managed to actually secure machines very quickly. So this sort of thing accelerated. I think COVID accelerated this whole drive. So I had to even buy machines, get quarantined for 7 days, get out, set up the lab, come back, do my work, go back, quarantine, set up. This was so from a business point of view, I would not have started it at that point. But I think it was a needy situation, and I thought maybe I could just a little bit make a difference, and that's what was maybe a major push factor in the whole thing.
Wow, that's the bright side of COVID in a way, right? And Daniella, what motivated you to start? Well, actually, when did you start thinking about going back? And
to be honest, I always thought about it. I just never knew. I was never sure of when I would be able to do it, because I knew that I wanted a job, like a job that I couldn't lose very easily. You know, some security and also the ability to do things, right? Like I need to go back to a job where I can develop my projects and maybe hire a team, and you know. But when is that going to happen? I don't know, right? So I was just like, well, hopefully one day it will happen. And I wasn't actively thinking about it in my postdoc, because, well, I had just started. Really, it was not like it was the start of it. And I was contacted by this institute and said, well, we're opening and we're hiring people, and do you want to try? So I was like, well, it's now or never, because it's within the National University, and the National University is a very secure place to work, I would say. It's just, it has been there for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it was a good opportunity, new institute, and they wanted to be cutting edge and have funding, of course, from the university, but also the ability to have a team and advisors and everything from abroad. So it was very forward looking in a way. So it was a bit like it's now or never, and maybe I just started my postdoc, but I think I have to do it. And it was more practical, I would say. I mean, I always wanted to come back, but it was a practical decision of like, well, this is the opportunity and I have to do it now. So I came back at 29, actually. I started my group at 29. I was not planning maybe to do it at that age, but it's turned out okay, I think, so far. So yeah, it was more, a practical decision more than anything else, I would say.
After I think I told you about this YASA program that I had attended. The guy who was organizing that was now planning to organize a similar kind of meeting in North America. So YASNA, something, Young African Scientists of North America. And one of the things that we started discussing, and of course it got cancelled because of the pandemic, but we started discussing having more dialogue about things that people in the diaspora would need to think about if they want to go back. So just to understand people's views, what are some of the mental barriers, and build upon some of the success stories like yours, for example, in order to sort of like then develop like some kind of toolkit or checklist. And how do people prepare themselves? I mean, it's good when you know, okay, I really want to go back. But there are also many people who are sort of like, I don't know, should I go back? And they're kind of thinking about it, and they don't even know, where do I start? Where do they start? So I just want you to give me maybe 1 or 2 points. You know, what are some of the things that kind of like helped you to make that decision and actually successfully reintegrate?
I think for me, one major point was not to just pick the bags and leave. I think no, you can start something in your own country, but still remain embedded in a sort of support structure. Because personally, people have bills, responsibilities, families, I don't know. And unless, of course, you have somebody giving you 10 million and they said, go, fine, you can do this. Well, why not? But if you are sort of in an insecure scenario, or unless if you have like going also to an institute, like a permanent job, or well paid and so forth, this is fine. Then yeah. But then you have to find a way sort of to network. And I'm also not in the same line also, I'm not also say people should always start like I did, something of their own, because I think one thing we do have is sort of welcoming attitude. I think you can always fit into something and make it bigger. I think as long as the people are welcoming, because I see myself, that's why I call it an institute, as a dean in the end, whereby people have their own research groups and finding their own money and doing whatever they want. So that means where for the next person joining, like we had a postdoc, they have computers, the building and whatever, and they can start their own project. So they don't have to start where I started, where there was really completely nothing. And then the other things, I think, if you're going to Zimbabwe, there are too many unknowns and scenarios and issues, and it's a difficult. I think you just be ready to be dynamic and to be responsive to what is happening around you. It's actually more difficult if you're going into the public sector. I don't. Maybe the public sector is different from in Mexico. I'm very interested by what she thinks. But for us, if I would go to the UZ or other universities, it doesn't matter how good you are. Many people go there; they're very good. but because they come from Europe or the US, but they are not used to the politic or the manner of doing things there, the culture that is there. So most people don't flourish, not because they are not able to, but it's hard to survive under certain conditions that don't give you the space to do so. So this is, I think, what people have to be aware, especially if they go to public university. There's a certain way of doing things there. It's very hierarchical. It's very whatever. You should be ready to know you are able to deal with it. For me, for sure, I was like, I'm not able to deal with it. I'm going to put my hopes and dreams, and also hopefully, if I had failed, then I'd say maybe. But I don't think I would have gone into a public university directly. I don't think with my attitude or my perspective, I would have thrived.
So I guess know yourself, right?
Yes, I think it's very important. I think for some people, it's perfectly fine. They will thrive and still do fundamental research. But you have to know sort of the culture there, I think, of the place. Yeah.
Daniella?
Agree completely. I will expand on what Brighton said, but I would say the first thing really, and I learned it after I came back. So actually I didn't do it, but it was hard for me. And then I realized I should have done this. It's basically know the place, but know, for example, at least in your job, I mean, in your area, what are the, not exactly qualifications, but what things are you expected to have to do your job? So, for example, when I came back, there's a national system of researchers in Mexico. And apparently, well, now I learned, you need to belong to it to, have things like students and, apply for grants. I didn't know this. So I didn't apply to this system until I was here. And you take a year to do it. So the first year I was here, I was blocked from doing many things because I didn't have this membership to this system. And you can apply from abroad. Like if I had actually worried about this, I would have, if I had planned very well my return, I would have realized that I had to do this. So it's that kind of thing, when I'm there, what do I need to do my job? Like, at least in my field where you have students and, basically academia, what do you need? Like, there are certain things certain hurdles you have to pass, and sometimes it's tests and things like that to be able to do your job. So maybe finding out that before moving is important. And also expanding on what Brighton was saying is very, very important. Yes, when I moved to Mexico and many other places, at least in Latin America that I know of, are very highly bureaucratic. There are a million steps to do a simple thing. Like a million people have to sign a piece of physical paper. So it takes forever. I mean, in a way, and as Brighton says, you need to know that you can deal with that because I did train on my undergrad here. I knew things took time. But now being on this side, it's like, I am expected to do what? I need to do my accounting and the legal things and the administration. And it's in a way much harder than, I would say that the minority of my time is spent doing science these days because it's mostly an administrative job. And it's okay when you accept it and you say, fine. If I want to advance, I do research in a team environment, I need to take care of these things. And if I integrate a part of my job and this is my job now, it's okay. But I'll be honest, when I moved back, I did hope to spend more time on research. And then you realize that's actually not the case. So
you had to adjust your expectations there.
Exactly. It's different what you end up doing in a way. And maybe that just comes from the fact that I myself, as I was just telling, I moved a bit not unexpectedly, but the offer came at a time where I wasn't really planning it. So I moved, and then a lot of things just were in the air, and it comes a bit from, maybe I was expecting something different. I didn't prepare very well to do it, but it's been okay. It's just you have to adjust, as you say, your expectations for the job, for the place. You have to know how it works, what you need to do your job there. Mostly that, but it can be very rewarding. I think I'm much happier here than I think I would be in another place.
Yeah, so I'm sure we'll come back a bit later to some of the challenges, and I just wanted to touch on this phenomenon that you guys you've come back. You mentioned earlier, Daniella, that there are other scientists who stayed and they're doing equally good science and so forth. But there's sort of like a bit of a debate as to are people who return, people who've immigrated and returned, are they doing better science? Are they better networked? Are they more productive and so forth? How do you feel about that phenomenon? Do you feel that you are necessarily more valuable maybe, or more doing better science or doing better than your counterparts that might never have emigrated?
No, I really don't think that's the case. I think that the advantage really was I was productive during that. I think that changes. When you go abroad, they produce data much quicker, and you're in a big team that they do that. You learn fast, you produce, so you make more contacts, at least in my case, because more people were, accessing this data and asking for, I don't know, people that analyze this other data. And I met lots of people over there, right? So I think a big advantage was the contacts, the productivity that I had when I was in the UK, that I learned many different things from many different people. But I would say it's not better science. I would just say maybe it has a different focus.
Or filling a different gap, maybe.
Yeah, because we are seeing, this is my field, it's personal, but what we do in our team is very high throughput genomics. Well, in a way, it's just like big data, and people here tend to be, people that train here for many reasons. Maybe it is resources, maybe it is just the priorities of the country, but they sometimes tend to study things more like one thing, but very deeply. So it's a different kind of thing. Like they learned very much about that thing they're studying, and it could be very useful for things, in the future, for therapy, for whatever. And they know that thing, and they can drug it, and they can do that, and and in a way, it's just different. Like we never get too much into one thing, right? So I think it's just that it's the focus of what we learned in the context. The context were an advantage, I think.
Yeah. I guess Brighton, you feel the same way?
I agree. I think very much. I think, calling your science better than others, I think it's a suicidal statement in general. I think it's different science. What I realized when going to Zimbabwe is the focus is completely different. Many people are doing a lot of surveillance. Like I'm doing on antimicrobial resistance. It's a big topic in Zimbabwe. But what most people are doing are just going there and counting who has what. That's mostly. It's just go around in a village and say who has how many cases do we have. No one is attempting to do drug discovery on that. No one has tried to solve the structure to really do sequencing to analyze, okay, what type of resistance do we have? No one is attempted to make a PCR kit to actually, make our own assays to quickly detect those resistances. So no one has really gone all the way to say vaccines for some of the problems that we have done. But I think I saw the focus from my point of view. It's more on cataloging what problems we have, epidemiological kind of going through our thing, or we send a lot of samples outside the country. I think it's two-way. I think either this is also sort of the maybe the teaching that is central here, and the World Health Organization gives mostly money and the United Nations for these type of projects that how many people have what, right? So maybe people don't have the resources to work on the other end of the spectrum. So you lack the capacity, because now if I want to do sequence, I need like 500,000 to buy a sequence, right? If I need to do like proteomics or proper genomic studies or whatever, I need a high-performing supercomputer, of which we actually do have a supercomputer. We just recently got half of the resources. That thing was built a long time ago, and no one has been really using it for anything useful. So that's why we are setting our big data kind of thing. So we come there, and we say, there's so much surveillance going on. But I'm not a surveillance person. I don't want to go around in the bushes and so forth. That's not my type. I want to do sort of the molecular stuff. Okay, what type of resistance do we have? Can we make a PCR kit out of it? What does that mean on the protein level? Can we repurpose some drugs onto here? Can whatever. So I'm trying to gather resources and work from the other end of the spectrum, because we need to develop a more proactive thinking and bold approach whereby we really say we should attempt to solve this on our own, not wait for somebody else to give a response. But there are a lot of research is going on in mushrooms production or drying mushrooms and so forth. It's important, but I have a different philosophy. It's a matter also a philosophy. That's why I call it different. I've lived in Switzerland, whereby the biotech industry contributes about 15 to 20% of the GDP. Right? Drug discovery, analysis, PCR. So I come with a different philosophy that I'm trying to push forward. But that doesn't make my science better or not. It's just different.
That's a good point. It's a fair point. And I think it's definitely important for you to have realized there's a gap in this area, right? and then start doing something about it. And then, of course, still working within the environment and working with those people that are doing different things. You're right. And you've actually convinced me about this, because I actually had a slightly different view about this. And I thought, oh, yeah, it's almost like, yeah, people, when they go back, they have better networks, they have more money, they have more resources, so they're doing better science. But actually, it's not necessarily always the case. And it probably, you're also bringing different perspectives, right? You're bringing different skills, different types of exposures. So that's definitely a good thing.
I just want to add one short point. It's difficult for a country like Zimbabwe, coming from abroad and networking inside the country, because there is this assumption or whatever, the stereotype that they think they know better. So, but without being well integrated within the Zimbabwean system or a Mexican system, or whichever system you're looking at, with the political players or the other university players, you might not understand the problem very well. I was 20 years outside the country. When I go back, I have my idea of what the problem might be, but I need to go and talk to the people there and really, then you really understand what the problem actually is. So you cannot just do your own thing on your own. Sometimes I realize one or two things, I had a misperception of what the problem was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. So of course you have to go and work with people there. It actually brings me to just discussing some of the issues or challenges or frustrations. You've already mentioned, bureaucracies and other things. I think we're all very much aware of the different ways that people are rewarded. Some situations are not so unavailable of sort of like flexible positions. So some people, I remember when I was back in Zimbabwe, I had to spend most of my time teaching. For me to eventually sort of like try to get, like Daniella, like you saying that you spend a lot of time doing admin stuff and so forth. And that leaves you with very little time to actually to focus on research. And yet you're still having to work 100%. So you're working 100% on, say, teaching and 100% on research. And yet, you have to sort of like work so much, double the amount of time. And then I think also even you've just mentioned, also touched on this, Brighton, whereby you had a different perception and perhaps even expectation, and you get there and you actually see things that are not quite as you thought they would be. I'm interested in your views about how you're received by your, I guess, the colleagues or, at the institutions or in your sort of community. Daniella, how was your experience just, settling down and getting on with your work?
Yeah, no, it's a mixed bag of things. I think some people were enthusiastic and they were like, yay, we're going to do some genome science and this is going to be fun and let's collaborate and do things. And then some other people were a bit more weary of these because, well, I'm sure we're all familiar with colonial science. And in the fact, in the way where people from abroad just come, take samples, take them away, and then do their thing, and that's it. So I was still perceived when I came back as being in the UK, like I was from them, and I was gonna steal their samples and just take them away to the Sanger and never to return. So I mean, it was, I think, the minority of the reactions, but I realized I had never thought about that, to be honest, back then. I started talking to people like, what have people done to you? And they're like, well, it's very common that they come and they say that we're gonna write a paper together, and they say, well, we appear in the list, but they never consider us in the analysis, or they call us when the paper is done and we're in the middle somewhere, not important at all, and that's it, right? So it's a bit sad that that's still going on. And I guess at the beginning it was I encountered a bit of resistance in that sense, being like, but you're from the Sanger, you just came back, you're going to, take our samples away and not. And I was like, well, no, I work here now. So that did take a while. I would say months of work to actually make people trust me and saying, well, we're going to work together here in Mexico, and maybe we're going to use the Sanger resources, but we are going to direct the science ourselves, and it's going to be for our priorities, because that's something very important. I think many times these other countries or these other research teams abroad that come and do those projects is for their own priorities, whatever they want to learn, and never really ask people here what are their worries. Or, in my case, when I talk to the medical doctors, like they worry about certain treatments, for example, and like, well, let's study that worries you. And they never do that. Well, at least the majority of times, I would think they don't really consider it like, well, we have the samples and that's it, right? Let's leave and do our own thing. So in a way, it was a bit of work to convince people that we were going to use their money because it's good that we have those resources, but it's going to be set by us, our agenda, our priorities, and of course they are very welcome to propose things to do, and we can do them, right? That took a very, very long time, I would say, but it's now working. It's now set up. So I think that's something I would say about these perceptions of coming back. I think it's getting better. I think it was definitely much worse in the past. But still some people do that they promise you, but you're going to be an author. Or I just encountered someone recently where they were like, but they shouldn't be authors because they're just giving me samples. And he's like, yeah, but do you know how difficult it is to get samples in this country? Like, it's a work of years. And you think that because you work next to a hospital in the US, somewhere very rich, this is not an important, kind of work. I don't know. These perceptions are very, very different from place to place.
Perception management is important. And Brighton, how have you, felt going back, and how were you received?
Well, it was difficult in many different ways. Part of it, for instance, we're bringing a bit of equipment and we wanted just a building. There are many free buildings even that are empty of government, universities, whatever. Even the innovation hubs, that have been created across the country, they're empty. But no one wanted to give us space. You understand? So no one wanted to give us space or whatever. And they were like, okay, but that was like one of sort of the major. And then we had some discussions with some collaborations with some institutes. Okay, no need to name them. And that just dragged on forever. And it was like, oh, now it needs cabinet to be. I'm like, we are not changing the law. This is just a cooperation agreement. You can say partnership or I don't know, some small, It was just difficult because initially I wanted to be embedded sort of in a governmental structure or in a public investor structure. And because my idea is we should share resources. I don't want to buy everything that other people have 10 times of. I want to buy what they don't have. And this way, because we're a resource limited country, no one can afford to have their own 10 PCR machines or whatever. That didn't work. And then we ended up having our own building. And then we bought our own equipment. And now we are much more equipped than these other guys. And then now they realized that, right? And because we opened the molecular diagnostics laboratory because I have a technical services department that funds my research. So far, we are operating our research with internal funds. We don't have a grant or whatever. But we are now profitable enough with all the testing, I don't know, diabetes, inflammation, COVID, and so forth, that I can actually pay my people, my colleagues, and buy consumables, reagents. But even then, when we offer, some laboratories, like, okay, if you need UV spectrometer or electrophoresis that you don't have, or to autoclave stuff, we have this stuff. You can come use it. They would rather go to some other public investor and charged for it. We're offering it for free. So there is sort of, I think, this private public perception of whatever it is. But I think we have now crossed the line. So the beginning was really difficult. Now we've crossed the line, I think also because I think the publicity that came with the Nature articles or the Times Life or whatever, now we have crossed the line that now we are being taken seriously and we've become a big, also influential player on the field. So now we even have, I think, one government department, I'm not going to announce it, which is going to invest directly in a part of our research. Because one of my drive is to find research in Zimbabwe. The money is there. So we are really pushing and lobbying to change the game because I don't like the idea of going to apply for money from the European Union because they give me money according to their perception of what the problem is. I think the guys in Zimbabwe know, and then they tell you should finish this in 6 months. I'm like, it's not possible, So I want these guys to say, look, okay, this is a big problem, a long-term problem, and give long-term commitments to it. So one of my drives is really to find money back home. We also apply for grants if you get lucky and you just get a little bit of free cash. But I think so far we are really pushing. But I think now we even have big investors trying to come in and invest in us. In the beginning was tough. And I think still people are very skeptical.
Yeah, the trust thing is an issue. You have to work on it. And, you've mentioned obviously something that is quite positive at a government level. You've got some people being interested in working with you. And I just want to hear from Daniella, and what do you think? I know that you get a lot of support, obviously, locally as well. And I just want to know what your thoughts are about how this can be enhanced, what they could be doing better or doing more of to help you settle.
We've got some funding from the Mexican government, but I would say it's hard for me to answer that question because I'm actually one of the favored ones. So they prioritized recently health, but at the expense of pretty much everything else. So in a way, we got lucky because we study health, we study cancer. But I have friends that study other things, that study, I don't know, ancient pathogens and the history of colonization in Mexico through biological means. They study, I don't know, mathematical modeling of biological processes, those kinds of things that are not deemed health lost. Well, at least a lot of the chunk of money that was destined for those kinds of research were lost. So it's just very hard because a country will set priorities according to whatever they decide it's important, and that can change in Mexico is a 6-year term for a president. So every 6 years, it can drastically change what they consider important. So I wouldn't know exactly how to answer the question as to the local resources. What I can say that I've tried to do is get resources from abroad, but to buy equipment and spend it and invest it here. And try to, with that money, kind of seed funding in a way, start running your lab that you then require much less amounts of money to actually just keep going. But the initial investment I have found is easier in a way to just get from abroad, because you can explain to them, this is a problem, and you have, no one has studied Latin Americans, and this is a problem in Latin America because these, and some people you can convince that. And for them, it's actually not a lot of money because it's much cheaper. Everything here is much cheaper in a way, like hiring a postdoc, hiring people is much cheaper than abroad. So for them, it's not a lot of money, and you can set up, keep running. So I would say, at least, I don't know if this is going to work. That's what I've been trying to do, because even though we have got money from the Mexican government as part of this favored health-related research, it's also very hard to spend. It's very bureaucratic. And at the moment, for example, I'm trying to purchase some mice just to do some experiments that I said I would do. And it's just very hard. I've been doing this since May. And they're like, oh, there's just a million papers. There's mice coming from the US. Like, you have to fill in 3,000 pieces of paper as to what these mice are going to do, where they're going to come, what they're going to eat. And it's like, well, it's just hard to spend as well. So in a way, I don't know. It's been easier, just to conclude, easier to get money from abroad and start with that kind of funding, in my experience, at least.
Well, let's hope that starts to change with more people going home and, more people, demanding things to be done differently. I mean, I was just going to mention that, in the beginning, we talked about your motivations to leave and to go away. And obviously, governments complain about brain drain and so forth. And I was reading somewhere where they were talking more about the sort of like, instead of always talking about brain drain, but actually talking about brain circulation, so that, you're actually just circulating the intellect, and also now talking about virtual mobility and so forth. And actually, for all these stakeholders, governments and funders to actually take advantage of, a new phenomenon where there are definitely many people that are either here or that go back that can really contribute to developing, science in those regions, and to take advantage, obviously, now of virtualization as well, for people to benefit in that way. What are your plans, Daniella? Do you plan to stay there? Do you plan to move again?
No, I like to stay. I got a house. No, I like to stay for as long as I can. I'm hoping that's a very long time. It is hard to say for sure, because, for a long time, I think, yes. But it changes. The climate changes constantly. And sometimes I've been here 6 years almost. And in these 6 years, things have changed. Like, sometimes they a part of your salary is in jeopardy, and then you're like, oh, I bought a house, how am I going to pay for this? And you don't know, and then it doesn't happen, and then you breathe again, and then it happens again, and then you don't know what's going to happen. So in a way, it's hard to say because you don't control those things. It's a bit unstable sometimes. So I'm hoping that I can stay here because I do enjoy my work here, even though it's mostly administration. I see my team and I see what they do, and I'm very proud of them. They've done very good work in the genetics of Latin Americans and predisposition to cancer. And I think it's important work. At least that's what moves me. And I'd like to stay. I wouldn't like to do this work from anywhere else because I would feel like a colonialist. So that's my plan. I hope it works out.
And Brighton, what's your plan?
Well, staying definitely. I think what I'm trying to create is beyond the person Brighton. I'm trying to create an institute that is not personalized, that survival or what is it, or sort of failure is just because of me. I think what I would really like to create is, that's why I call it an institute, a surviving institute, policies, framework, procedures, a different type of thinking, educational wise. We want to, we are registering to have our own university because we cannot deal with public. And the students that we receive from public universities are not educated enough. Actually, they didn't know most of the machines they're supposed to know. They've read about them, but they've never seen them. We really would like to create, I think for me, a self-sustaining institution that outlives me. I'm just doing maybe the hardest work, which is like initiating this whole thing and making sure it's actually stable. And I think until a couple of days, I think we've been managing, but now we also have, I think there's an article that came in Frankfurter Allgemeine in German newspaper, and we have like big interest from huge German investors in certain areas that could really give us sort of some sustainability and some freedom that we need to maneuver to do with that. As for me, I think I will be basically shuttling between Europe and Zimbabwe. I don't think you have to be physically. There are many things you have to go for conferences, you have to network, you have to discuss research projects, and I think it's very important. So primarily I'll be in Zimbabwe, but I'll also be in Europe because I also, beyond this is also work. But I spent my whole adulthood in Europe, and most of my friends are here. And I don't so many people are there.
Well, thank goodness it's now a global village. So
yeah, exactly. So I want to embrace both worlds. I think it's really these partnerships. You create them, you groom them. You take, you go there and we create, we teach. I have a lot of people that are part of the institute, but are even based in Switzerland. They would be going there to do workshop and physically for workshop, maybe for a month. And then they go back, they have jobs in Switzerland. I cannot hire people that have the expertise I want because maybe the guy is getting, 15,000 or 20,000 a month here in Switzerland. That's the guy you want, right? I'll take he teaches online and comes and for a month for sort of practical training and so forth. This kind of hybrid model. Otherwise, in Zimbabwe alone, I would never get the people that are well trained to do what I want to do. So it's always going to be hybrid. And I think COVID sort of normalized our situation.
Yeah. So finally, you have both been great mentors today, sharing your experiences, knowledge and views. And I just want you to each give me at least just one take-home message or tip for research scientists that are out there who are contemplating the big move, or at least some words of inspiration for those that may not have started thinking about it, but could start to see this as a viable option for their careers. So just one message each, please. Daniela, you go first.
I would say just keep your contacts close. They will help you whatever happens. So if I have one piece of advice to say, is just that every relationship that you cultivate in your way, especially if it's people from many different places that have different experiences and can help you in different ways, just keep them close. And I think that's really the most important thing that has helped me navigate this move back.
Great. And Brighton?
I think, of course, be pragmatic, but I think it's good to pursue your dream. I don't want people just say, now I want to do this, I'm just going to go, right? I think the people have to be pragmatic. what I'm doing right now, whether it fails in the future or not, you have part of business is to calculate your risks and whatever. Otherwise, you don't have to be naive about it. But I think it's the most satisfying and fulfilling thing I've done so far.
Wow.
It's better than my finest manuscripts. Because now I even feel I gave some people jobs and so forth. That alone, minus all the science we're talking about, you have people that are employed with families and all that, and that I never thought about. You have someone say, "Oh, my child is school fees and all this kind of stuff." Like that's a whole different sort of satisfaction that I was not even anticipating or satisfied, but also a lot of responsibility. I feel like I'm a super parent, which is too much pressure than failing to produce a manuscript, because you have lives of people depending on your success. Because I think you can survive. Like me, if you have reached a postdoc level and the success you have, you can always find something to do. You have always a fallback plan, but those people don't.
Wow, that's really some rich words today. So I'm really grateful for the time we've spent today. It's been really, really informative, and I learned so much and actually felt inspired by both of you. So thank you very much for the interesting discussions and giving us and our audiences a chance to explore, the benefits, the challenges, the opportunities of emigrating and returning home and still doing great science. So I'm really, really pleased to have heard from you. Could you please share with our listeners where they can find you on Twitter or LinkedIn?
Sure. My Twitter handle is @Daniella_Oaks, and that's really my only social network. So see you there.
Yeah, so I think you can find me on Twitter at Dr. Samatanga, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. Just search for my name, Brighton Samachanga.
And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Please follow us on Twitter at mentor_podcast, where we'll let you know when we have new episodes being released. You can listen to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and SoundCloud by searching for Your Digital Mentor Podcast. You can also reach us by email, so please send your comments and questions to inquiries@yourdigimentor.net. And as always, information on the podcast and how to reach us will be in the description box, including how to connect with our guests and also links to information and resources. And finally, our goal is for this podcast to be shared as a resource, so please remember to tell people about us. So thanks again, and see you in 2 weeks. This episode is supported by Advanced Courses and Scientific Conferences, a program which develops and delivers training and conferences that span basic research, cutting-edge biomedicine, and application of genomics in healthcare. Through engaging and networking, the events educate, inspire, and transform careers worldwide.
This episode is also supported by the Wellcome Sanger Institute. It undertakes large-scale research that forms the foundations of knowledge in biology and medicine. It uses the power of genome sequencing to understand and harness the information in DNA. The Sanger's discoveries are used to improve health and to understand life on Earth.